is an increasing consensus that the current Indian government is experiencing what could be called as policy paralysis. As an outsider, would you agree with that?
Well, I think on the reform fronts, especially given the personalities involved at the top of the current government who were reformers in the early 90s in India, I think the progress on reforms has been disappointing. I think, however, the central bank, the RBI, has been really one of the more aggressive central banks in dealing, at least under Dr. Reddy's period, in dealing with financial stability and asset bubbles, I think, very effectively. And now under Governor Subbaro, finally in focusing on inflation. I think the RBI has still a ways to go before it brings inflation under control. I think the paralysis that is worrisome, though, is more on the reform side, especially the opening up side, and really implementing this long overdue push in enhancing India's infrastructure bill. This needs to be done urgently.
So is Reserve Bank of India a very aggressive central bank, or like other central banks, they are also behind the curve when it comes to inflation management?
Well, I think they were behind the curve when they first started to address the inflation problem. And now with cumulative rate hikes in excess of 5 percentage points since the rate hike cycle has started, I think they're catching up with the curve. They still have a ways to go. I think it's a lot of hand-wringing over the so-called slowdown in the Indian economy right now, but this is what the RBI is trying to achieve to bring inflation under control. And I think the fact that growth is slowing suggests to me that the RBI is, if they're not behind the curve, they're certainly doing a fairly good job of catching up.
Do you think the rampant speculation in commodity prices is over, and commodity prices in the near term they've peaked out?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I think global growth itself is on a much slower trajectory than it was during the first leg of the so-called commodity supercycle from middle of 2002 to the middle of 2007. We had global growth during that period averaging about 5%. I think over the next several years, the best we can get from the global economy is 4%. I do concede that the mix of a slower global growth trajectory is more skewed toward commodity-intensive economies like China and India, but I don't think that's enough to really provide fundamental support for another spike upwards in commodity prices.
Are you fundamentally bullish or bearish on crude?
I think we're in a trading range right now. I don't think we're going to go dramatically above present levels. In any given week or month, we could certainly break through some resistance points on the upside or the downside. But in a 4% global growth scenario, I do not see us moving up to sharply higher highs quarter in and quarter out on oil prices.
Who has the potential to surprise us going forward, the Indian consumer or the Chinese consumer?
I think you should prepare for the emergence of the Chinese consumer. I think it'll be the biggest consumption story the world has ever seen. The consumption share of the Chinese economy is ridiculously low. It's at 35% or even lower, depending upon how you do the math. And come on, this is the People's Republic of China. It's time for the people to increase their share. And I think this new plan, in terms of providing jobs and boosting rural incomes and providing support for the social safety net, will have a surprisingly positive impact in spurring growth of internal private consumption in China. I hear a lot, it's going to take generations to do it. There's sort of an Asian DNA that's predisposed against consumption towards saving. I don't believe that for a second. Watch out, the Chinese consumer is coming.
The top trade for the year 2010 was to buy India and sell China. The top trade for the year 2011 so far has been to buy commodities. What, to your mind, could be the top trade for next 2 years?
I do think that in terms of the global economy, we're at a fundamental sort of structural inflection point where the impetus is really shifted away from the large, wealthy economies of the developed world. The American consumer is in still the early stages of a multi-year pullback, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on export-led economies in the developing world, especially in developing Asia. And I think the big story over the next few years is, will export-led developing economies take this as a wake-up call to change their macro structures and derive more support from internal demand. And with respect to China, which is, I think, at the margin going to be the biggest story in this part of the world, I think they're up to it.
My final question, and your discretion, sir, how you want to answer this one. How has life changed for you? Earlier you were an economist, now you are a professor.
Well, I'm still an economist. I'm actually teaching economics courses at Yale University, and it's very refreshing. I've spent the last 30 years on Wall Street and traveling the world, especially in this part of the region. And while I've enjoyed the discussions and the exchange, over time I've gotten tired of talking to old people. So now I'm at a university talking to young people who have a different perspective, and it's very refreshing and very energizing to deal with bright, young, curious minds. But I'm still doing economics, whether I'm at Yale University or sitting with you here in Mumbai or back at my offices at Morgan Stanley in New York. I'm an economist by training, by habit, and by passion, and that has not changed one bit.
So next time I'm there, I'll certainly sign up for one of your courses.
Well, I'd be happy to have you show up.
Mr. Roach, what a delight to have you on ET Now. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.